rays of the searchlight were kept fixed on the harbour mouth across the East Pier, and men waited breathless. The wind suddenly shifted to the northeast, and the remnant of the sea fog melted in the blast. And then, between the piers, leaping from wave to wave as it rushed at headlong speed, swept the strange ship before the blast with all sails set, and she gained the safety of the harbour. The searchlight followed her, and a shudder ran through all who saw her, as they realised that the ship, as if by miracle, had found the harbour, unsteered, saved by the hand of a dead man. The schooner paused not, but rushing across the harbour, pitched herself on the accumulation of sand and gravel washed by many tides and many storms. But then, strangest of all, the very instant the shore was touched, an immense dog sprang up on deck from below, running forward, jumped from the bow onto the sand, making straight for the steep cliff, where the churchyard hangs over the laneway to the East Pier so steeply that some of the tombstones have fallen to the sea beneath, and the dog disappeared into the darkness, which seemed intensified just beyond the focus of the searchlight.
I took those words from one of the most famous books in the world. This is the actual beach that the Demeter, the doomed ship, landed on.
And these are the famous 199 steps which take you up the cliff which the dog sprang up.
That dog was Count Dracula, and he was making his way right here to St. Mary's Churchyard.
This is one of the most unbelievable places I have ever visited, with graves stretching out as far as the eye can see. These are all past residents of the Yorkshire coastal town of Whitby, and that raises a question.
Why was this beautiful little fishing port chosen for one of the main locations for one of the most famous horror books in the world? These are the new adventures of the Bakery Bears, and it's time for us to take a walk with Mr. Stoker. In 1890, Abraham Stoker will have walked down this path. He was tired. He was business manager for world-famous actor Henry Irving, and he just returned, or he was in the process of returning, from a grueling tour of Scotland. Now, Henry Irving, Abraham's boss, knew that Abraham needed a rest, and he told him he had the perfect place for him to go for a little holiday. He said, "Why don't you go to Whitby? I went there once with the circus." Abraham didn't want to, but he said, "If you send for my wife and my young son, then I'll go." And he did, and he came here.
Welcome to 6 Royal Crescent, Whitby. This was Mrs. Vesey's guest house, and in 1890 it was quite a chic spot. Just think a moment. This was a time before international travel became the norm, but Victorian people were just like so many of us. A holiday was feeling the sand between your toes, and if you were lucky, the sun on your back. So Bram stopped here on his journey back south from Scotland and waited for his family to arrive and their holiday to properly begin. But remember, this was of course late Victorian England, and even with the recent arrival of the railways, it would take nearly a week for his family to arrive. So all he could do was wait.
Every morning, old Mrs. Vesey liked to clean Bram's room, so he'd take a walk down into town. This walk that I'm doing right now. And I'm trying to put myself in his head as he took that walk on that August morning in 1890, because what was about to happen to him was going to shape the rest of his life.
Whitby had been founded in 656 AD with the formation of its abbey, and it had grown steadily every year since. This is one of the oldest streets in the whole town, with houses dating from the 13th and 14th centuries. Now, over the years, fishing had become the town's main industry, and by 1753 it was one of the busiest fishing ports in the country. It was only natural then that whaling would take place, and by 1833, 55 huge ships were operating from the harbour. As Bram walked that August morning, these are the sights he would have seen, and what I find so striking is so much of the locations look the same, so we really are walking with him. But by the time he had arrived in 1890, the big ships had got so big they couldn't fit in the port anymore, so they'd headed up the coast to the larger ports.
But as the ships left, the railway arrived, and as Bram took his fateful walk that morning, he was experiencing something similar to Monte Carlo.
In 1843, Whitby railway station was built. The town's geographical location had previously kept away tourists, but now rich Victorian families arrived in search of sun and sand. With them, they brought money to spend, and investment in the town started to grow. A huge array of posh hotels had sprung up to service their needs. Bram Stoker himself would stay here at the Royal Hotel in his many subsequent visits to the town. And as he strolled by on his way down to the harbour in 1890, this would have resembled and even bettered the best hotels in London. But as he walked, something in the sights he saw must have inspired him. He'd recently read stories of the Carpathian Mountains, and he'd become obsessed with the mythological stories of vampires.
And I like to believe that as soon as he turned that corner behind me, around the Royal Hotel, and he took in the view, the inspiration for Dracula took hold, because before him
lay a sight that quite possibly inspired the writing of his masterpiece. For there in front of him lay a beautiful beach and a breathtaking church. Here were two of the key locations for the story he was just about to write.
And you have to wonder how quickly he made his way here, to the churchyard that stands proud over the town of Whitby. I like to think it was the same day, and here too cast its spell on Bram. Let's take more words from Dracula and the heroine, Mina Murray.
Right over the town is a most noble ruin of immense size, full of beautiful and romantic bits. Between it and the town there is another church, the parish one, round which is a big graveyard, all full of tombstone. This, to my mind, is the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town and has a full view of the harbour and all the way up the bay. In one place, part of the stonework of the grave stretches out over the sandy pathway far below. There are walks with seats beside them through the churchyard, and people go and sit there all day looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. I shall come and sit here often myself and work. Indeed, I'm writing now with my book on my knee and listening to the talk of three old men who are sitting beside me. The harbour lies below me with, on the far side, one long granite wall stretching out into the sea with a curve outwards at the end of it, in the middle of which is a lighthouse.
Just look, he's describing the view exactly.
It's more like a guidebook than gothic horror. But that's what made this book so groundbreaking. He set terrifying fiction slap bang in the middle of the world we all live in, which gave it realism. He even got the name of Dracula's first victim from one of the gravestones. No one had written fiction quite like this before.
But it wasn't just that. Bram wrote the book in a way which I still think is current today. Now, I read this book for the first time researching this show, and I was really taken aback with how he put it together. Because what he does is, rather than write a normal narrative which you would expect in a story where it starts and it finishes, it's a series of diary entries. So it might be a diary entry from Jonathan Harker, who's the hero, or Mina Murray, who's the heroine. And actually what he does, which is so clever with Mina Murray, is it's her journal. So within a journal, of course, you could have paper clippings, and he does that. So again, he's telling the story in a way which is unbelievably current, and it makes it more real. Now, I'm sat on the beach. I found a perfect little spot, and the hotel which we walked past earlier on the show, the Royal Hotel, is literally just up there, and Mrs. Vasey's boarding house is just behind that. So I'm a stone's throw from where Bram stayed, and you can rest assured, because this is his nearest beach, that he would have walked along that pier, he would have come down these steps, and he would have played here with his wife and with his son, guaranteed. So this could not be a better spot than to have a little knit. And while we're doing that, I think I should score it, shouldn't I? First of all, for interestability. And this is where it gets tricky, because this story is intensely interesting. And Whitby Abbey, which many people maybe would have expected that we would have gone to, but that would be one of our favourite places to knit. That's somewhere where we know. If you remember, in this series, it's new adventures. We're going to places we've never experienced before. Now, Whitby Abbey, which is way over that way, that is like super interesting. There's loads of history. It's exactly like places like Fountains Abbey and Revo Abbey. Whitby as a town, it is interesting. It's really interesting, but you've got to dig deep for it. What's happened over the course of time, as I get on with a bit of knitting, is it has become quite commercialised. So there's an awful lot of arcades where you can go in and you can play games, you can play fruit machines and things. There's lots and lots of fish and chip shops. So it's a real tourist venue, and I suppose it was back in 1890. But the problem is, as time has gone on, those things that were there in 1890 have been updated and things have been changed. So for interestability, for this story, I mean, it would score really highly. But as a town, I think for interestability, given how it is now, it's probably going to be about a 6. But what about for knittability? Well, there are tons and tons and tons of places to sit down and have a knit. There's loads of seats, there's beaches, there's absolutely loads of places. And I would say that that makes it pretty much perfect for knitting. So for knittability, I think we would have to give it an 8. So far, it's a pretty good score.
But hold on a minute, we've got a picnic to source and a story to finish.
So join us later in the show when we'll be finding out how Bram Stoker named his amazing book. And we'll also be going to the shop where Bram stopped for a coffee on his walk that morning, and I'll be buying 2 of their most famous delicacies. You join me back on Bram Stoker's fateful walk that summer of 1890, and en route, he stopped for a coffee.
25 years before Bram arrived in Whitby, this fine young lady was selling her baked goods from a cart in the street. This is Elizabeth Botham, and as her reputation grew, she bought a shop. And this is it. By 1890, it was a bustling and rather beautiful tea rooms here on Skinner Street. And this is what the tea room looked like around the time of Bram's visit. I can just imagine him sat drinking his tea deep in thought, lost in a world which he never expected to find on his holiday in Whitby. Bothams continued to thrive throughout the 19th and into the 20th century, and what I love is that it's still owned and run by the same family. Now, I don't have time for tea, but I do have time to pick up one of Botham's most famous cakes, and a pork pie too, I think, all set for my picnic later on in the show. 5 days passed with Bram making the same walk every morning down to the harbour and beyond. Every day his story must have grown a little more as everything began to fall into place. He said when interviewed in later years that he had based the character of Dracula on the man who had sent him on his holiday to Whitby, Henry Irving. Here is a rare photo of them together around the time Dracula was first published. Now, don't panic. Irving was not a vampire, but he was, according to anyone who knew him, self-absorbed and profoundly manipulative. He also loved to cultivate rivalries between his many followers. To remain in Henry Irving's inner circle required careful courting of his fickle affections. Now, to those of you who have read Dracula, you'll notice some distinct similarities between our actor and our Transylvanian count. In the space of just a few days, on his walks down to this harbour, Bram had the makings of a story and someone to base his lead character on.
But Bram still needed a title for his book, and he would find it just up there, next door to the Marine Hotel, in the old public library.
Clearly inspired, our author Bram Stoker is now on the hunt for a name for his vampire, and he wandered into the town's library. Fate led him to a book recording the experiences of William Wilkinson, British ambassador to Romania. Wilkinson's book wrote of the history of a 15th century prince who liked to impale his enemies on wooden stakes. His name was Vlad Tepes, but he was known locally as the Son of the Dragon. And the old Romanian translation for Son of the Dragon? It's Dracula. Our novel has a name, and one of the 20th century's most famous characters is born. How interesting that not only did Bram take the name of Dracula, but he also stole the idea of dispatching enemies with stakes. And just look, this is the site of the Old Town Library. How fitting that the location that gave Dracula its name and inspired our author now is the home of Whitby's very own Dracula experience.
Just a few days later, Bram was told of a story of a shipwreck which had landed right here on this beach just 5 years before Bram had arrived in 1890.
This is an actual picture of the Dmitry, a ship which sailed from Narva in Russia, and it crash landed on Tate Hill Beach in 1895, 5 years before Bram's arrival and his inspiration for Dracula. He rearranged the name to Demeter, he had her sailing from Narva, and we have the fictional vessel which carries Dracula to Whitby. Once again, he's based horror on reality. How tantalising it must have been to read his book when it was published in 1897. Here was a fictional story with some of its key moments linked directly to real destinations and real events. Whitby was a thriving tourist attraction already, so many of Dracula's readers would know the town, or at least know someone who had visited. Its links to reality would, I'm sure, have led many a Victorian lady to wondering, what if the story is true? Now, the book itself wasn't an immediate bestseller, but its reviews were unstinting in their praise. The Daily Mail, one of the biggest newspapers of the day, ranked Bram Stoker's writing prowess far above Mary Shelley, Edgar Allan Poe and Emily Bronte. But as the years progressed following its initial publication, Dracula's popularity grew beyond recognition. Bram Stoker had given birth to a character which still fascinates us today. As of 2017, approximately 235 films featured Dracula in a major role. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm ready for some food, so I think we should pop back to the beach and see what I picked up in Botham's Bakery.
Yes, it's finally time for a picnic, and I've come back to my lovely stone on the beach because it is the perfect spot for said picnic. And do you know what's interesting about Dracula is it was initially put out there as a play, and of course Bram wanted his great friend Henry Irving to play the lead, and Henry did. He did one performance and then he refused. He came off stage and said, I never want to do that again. I never even want to see that again. And I just wonder if it's because he saw so many similarities with his own character. But it is time for a picnic, and I have been to, of course, the place where Bram Stoker went for his cup of tea or coffee, who knows what he had, when he first came and stayed here in 1890. I've been to Botham's. And what have I got? Well, and I'm actually really hungry. Oh no, this feels quite oily actually. Yeah, it is, it's proper oily. But, oh no, look at that. There's loads of fat on the bottom of that. Let's give it a go though. Do you know what that is? That's actually apple sauce, which makes it really interesting. I thought it was fat, but it's not. It's really nice. There's no fat on that at all. So I completely take it back. Crumbs. And there are loads and loads of really good places to get food. There's a really famous fish and chip shop called the Magpie Cafe, which Kay loves. I've actually never been in. And there was even a queue today, and it's middle of November. And what do I have for pudding after my rather delicious pork and apple pie? It's a Yorkshire curd tart, and I'm going to use this as a napkin. Wow, that really did. It was full of applesauce, which I suppose is really good. So, these are one of my favourite things. It's a curd tart, so it's got like a custard in it. but it's cooked quite a lot, and it's also got currants in there too. I'll bite in and I'll show you. That's what the inside looks like, and it's quite lemony, and lemon's just one of my favourite things. So that is actually really, really delicious. You see, Mr. Seagull, you mustn't feed them, otherwise they attack. So, picnicability, that delicious curd tart. There is literally everything here that you could want. So fish and chips, or if you wanted a pie from the pie shop, or the sandwiches, or there's restaurants, it's all absolutely there and on your doorstep. So it's got to score highly. I think a 9 for picnicability. Because also as well, you could come down here if you brought your own food, you could come down here and have a picnic. So, score for picnicability, it's most definitely a 9. So we've got 9 for picnicability, we've got 8 for knittability, and we've got 6 for interestability, which gives us a grand total score of 23. Let's plot it on the New Adventures leaderboard. And that's actually our final adventure for 2017, so it's the complete leaderboard for this season.
And so we reach the end of our story. We're a morning walk through a beautiful harbour town, led to arguably the most famous Gothic horror story in the world.
But we've also reached the end of our series, and what a journey it's been.
From the footsteps of Hadrian at Tynemouth Castle, to a search for the Druids at Brimham Rocks. Uncovering the story of St Godric at Finkel, to tea with Mr Darcy at Pemberley. This year, we've uncovered stories of monsters, monks, hermits, and lost cities, and we're only just getting warmed up.
But 2018 will see our greatest new adventures yet, as we go exploring the gardens of Capability Brown, we go searching for the manor house of Braveheart, we go looking for penguins in Yorkshire, and we uncover the real story of Peter Rabbit. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon for more new adventures.
Good morning everyone, it is the final day filming for New Adventures 2017, and I thought I'd just do a little bit of a behind the scenes video diary as I get there, get filming and come away. I thought you might find that a little bit fun. So I've punched in my destination into the sat nav. I've got about 50 miles of windy country roads to navigate, so I should get there in about an hour and 15 minutes, I think. So I shall start the engine, we'll get cracking, and let's find out where we're filming today. Okay, we're here. It's the one thing about coming here, and where have we come to? It is Whitby, by the sea on the east coast. It's an unbelievable place that I have been to before, not for a long time, but where we're going to explore, I had no idea what it was and that it was there and that you could even go see it. So excited to show you guys. But one of the challenges with Whitby is the amount of time it takes to get here, just because of the fact that it is, I mean, to us, it's just out in the middle of nowhere. I think we're in an unfortunate spot with getting here, but it takes so much longer than you anticipate. So I am now slightly working against the clock because I'm probably half an hour behind schedule. So I need to get cracking, get my stuff together, and get filming. So it's a quick hot-footed across Whitby, and I've headed straight here. Shot one of the day is Tate Hill Pier, which you've just looked at over there, and as you'll have seen in the episode, it's one of the key locations for today's filming, but also for Dracula. It's one of the oldest piers, potentially the oldest pier actually in the country.
it's dated from 1301, which is just insane. So beaches have been landing there for a long time, and it could not have been a better day. This was one of the reasons why I had to do this film on my own, was because we were trying to pick the right day, and we shifted filming days a number of times, and we couldn't have hit it better. Kay was stuck at home dying, getting ready for an update, a Bryonybear's yarn update, and I headed out here and got these just beautiful shots. I mean, if you think it is freezing cold, it's the middle of winter, but what that gives you is beautiful, crisp days. And I mean, how still is that water? Not still, though, of course, when the Demeter sailed between those piers right there and crash landed on that beach. And here we're getting ready, actually, for the very first shot featuring me of the day, and this actually didn't make the final cut. So what I do prior to filming, because we don't film it in the order that you see it, we film it in the order that we walk through. It's a bit like shooting a film. You walk through the locations, and when you hit the certain spots that fit with the relevant storyline, that's when you film that particular bit. So this bit actually didn't make the cut, but let's just have a listen.
I took those words from one of the most famous books in the world. This is the beach that the doomed ship Demeter landed on.
Neil, what happens when we film is just like shooting a movie. We review the footage, which I've just gone to do there. I wasn't happy with that at all, and so I redid it. Sometimes, if it's Kay, we might redo it 15 times. No, I'm joking. Although I do seem to remember in a Favourite Places to Knit, there was one, I think it was when we went to Alnwick Castle, we were doing the Harry Potter thing, that she did so many takes, it was just hilarious. But this now is, I mean, and this just highlights as well how interesting it is, and it's exactly the same when you shoot a feature film. I've read interviews with actors before where they say how strange it is. For example, let's pick up Harry Potter again. The closing scenes of Harry Potter were the first things that they actually filmed, and you know, it's just bonkers until you get sort of into the mindset of how to do it. And now we've done a few of these, and thankfully we have, but it is the most efficient way to work, is walk through the location as you hit the particular places where you need filming, do the filming. Otherwise you'd be walking backwards and forwards in the same town all day. Now look at that shot there, look at the top of the hill. There's the cross, which you will have seen a little bit of within the episode already. I mean, it's so poignant looking at that. And you can see, can't you, Bram Stoker will have looked at that, but also, you know, anyone who's visited the town. Oh, watch this. Oh. It's my famous comedy trip.
That was a trick, it wasn't real.
But that cross on top of the hill is just so, it is inspirational, and I think that's what I've enjoyed so much about this visit. I love to walk in the footsteps of anyone who has been inspired to do something great, and whilst I would never have considered Dracula a book that I would have chosen to read before, on researching this and on reading a bit of it, I am reading it, and it's brilliant. And that is one of the things about these adventures that I love, is finding out things which I had no idea about, and that's why it differs so much from Favourite Places to Knit. We adore doing these. Here's some more filming.
Just a few days later, Bram was told of a story of a shipwreck which had landed right here on this beach just 5 years before Bram had arrived in 1890. It was of the Dmitri, and it had sailed from Narva in Russia. He rearranged the name just a little bit, Demeter, and had it sailing from Varna. And we have our ship that brings Dracula to this very beach. Once again, he based fiction on fact.
Neil, I did quite a bit more filming around Tate Hill Pier, which you've already seen in the episode. So let's crack on up the hill, which is where I headed after I'd been at Tate Hill Pier. This footage I got specifically for trying to show you guys a sort of visual version of the dog running up the hill. Not very dog-like though, is it? But check out the views on the way. You know, you can totally see why so many people came here and were inspired in the 19th century. What a shock it must have been for these artistic types who had maybe been stuck in cities, who suddenly had the opportunity to get out of London and to get, you know, out into the wilds a little bit and to see sights which had only been seen by fishermen. And up the hill we go to, of course, that cross which we saw a moment ago. It's hard to describe being stood next to it. Now, I've been to Whitby a lot, and I've never really acknowledged that it's there because you get sucked into the Abbey. Whitby Abbey lies just behind the church, and we will catch a glimpse of it, and you may well have caught just a little glimpse of it in the episode itself. But you get focused on that. When you're someone like me, you get very focused on the ancient ruins, and you forget a little bit about what came after. And what came after it still is old, because the majority of these churches were built in the 16th, 15th century. And coming up here for the first time after visiting Whitby so much and walking along a path which I'd never walked on before, and in the footsteps of Bram Stoker, and just taking in the sights that he saw, and just thinking about how it must have come together in his head, because it did over a period of 5 days. It was really quite breathtaking, and something that I'll not forget. Now, in the course of research, I found this picture of the Demeter, the ship, of course, which, as we discovered in the episode, Bram based his Dimitri. No, I've got it the wrong way around, haven't I? It was the Dimitri, and he changed it to the Demeter. Now, if you look in the background of that picture, you'll see some houses, and we're walking through those houses now, and look at that there. That's Fortune's Whitby Kippers, and if you take a look at the sign, if you scroll back and look at the sign, that started trading and has been trading from that spot. It's just on the left now, walking back the other way, since 1872. So what is to say that at some point in Bram's first stay, or any of his subsequent stays over the following 6 years, that he didn't take a walk down here? Look, that's even called Old Kipper Cottage. I wonder if one of the Kipper fishermen used to live in there. Now, what you're always trying to do when you're somewhere like this is get authentic location shots. So it was just perfect to have the gas man come driving by. I love that. But I mean, it's just a reflection, is it, of the modern world that we live in. 15th, 16th century houses, and the gas man, because it is, of course, the 21st century now, isn't it? Now, for a very short section of the visit for a walk with Mr. Stoker, I actually did go to certain parts which I do know and I have been to before, this being one of them. It's the Old Town Square. I mean, and this is seriously old. And it just brings into focus a little bit how strange it is that when you go visit these places, you tend to focus on a tiny area and you don't look beyond that. Hence the reason why we'd never been up to St Mary's Church before. We didn't even realise that Bram Stoker had stayed in the house at Mrs Vasey's up on the top of the hill. We'd never even walked up there before. Within my visit, probably 10% of it I was walking in areas that I'd walked along before, like here. But then for the other 90%, it was as if I was visiting somewhere I'd never been to before. And that's unbelievable, really, when you consider that I've lived in Yorkshire all my life and I've been to Whitby an awful lot. So, so exciting to find things like this. I've walked across this swing bridge, but I've never really stopped and thought, hold on a minute, what was there before? What's the history of it? Why was it even there? And of course, it was there because in the old days, when the big boats, the whaling ships were coming in and out, they were huge and they needed the space to get underneath. So of course it had to open up. So I'm now making my way up to Royal Crescent and we're completely off the beaten track. Didn't even know any of this existed. And look, a beautiful old church, which I wish I'd had time. Look, I'm checking to see where I need to be going. Because that's the other thing as well, that, you go to a place, you think you know it, but without Google Maps, I was so grateful for 4G reception, because it is an ancient town, so the roads do not follow any pattern at all. They're shooting off in all sorts of directions. The road actually to the right, that was a dead end, and had I not had Google Maps, I would have headed off up that way because I knew that was where my next port of call was. And I've now been filming for nearly 3 hours, and I'm only just getting to the very first shots of the episode. And there it is, right behind me. It's the house which Bram stayed in. And what was quite funny was those ladies behind there, you can see them just approaching. I didn't even notice them. I started filming, they get closer and closer, and I've got no idea they're there. And then as I finished filming, you'll see right at the end, they are literally on top of me, and it gave me such a shock. So I stopped it quite abruptly, but I think I edited that out of the final edition of the show. But you know, it is quite funny when you're filming out and about like this, because people are so unbelievably polite, which is so nice. When I was shooting down on the beach, quite a wide shot because it's such a large beach. Thank you for my tea. Kay's just brought me a cup of tea.
Hello everyone. Would you like a cup of tea?
And a double decker.
A double decker?
Ooh, a decker. So down on the beach, yeah, people were so unbelievably nice. Massive wide shot, huge expanse of space, and people were trying to stop outside the shot so as not to disturb the filming. I don't know if that's a British thing, but how unbelievably polite. Now, walking past one of the many posh hotels, this obviously featured heavily in the episode, and it's really difficult. It's difficult for me, never mind you, to imagine this as a hotel which would have rivaled those in Monte Carlo. But honestly, it would have done, because this was built at a time when the money in the country was coming here. This is where they were heading for their holidays. And this, for the years following, Bram came first in 1890, but then 1891, and all the years following up to the publication of Dracula, he stayed right there in the Royal Hotel. Now, this for me is the shot of the whole episode, because this is the view, the absolute definite view that Bram Stoker saw on his walk that morning that inspired Dracula. And it is pretty, isn't it?
It's very pretty.
I mean, the church at the top there, it looks bigger than it actually was, because in the background, as we mentioned before, you've got Whitby Abbey. But look, hey, these are parts of the town I'd never seen before.
No, I was just looking.
Loads and loads of streets like this.
Gosh.
With lovely little
aren't they?
shops. It's reminiscent of York.
It is.
Which is, I mean, it's right, really, because this was being built up around the same time that the current streets of York were.
It's actually reminiscent of our town as well. Do you know all the little snickets in town?
Which would make sense, and the reason why it would make sense is because, of course, that really took off. That town took off. The investment came in at the same time as the railways.
Right.
And that's the same time as where we live.
Yeah.
That's when the town really took off. Now, we're coming up on...
The Magpie Cafe. Can you see it, everyone? Ooh.
I've never been in there.
I have.
I know you have.
Yeah, I've been
I
in...
told them in the episode.
Oh, I've been in twice, I
Right.
think.
And look, yes, I mean, as you can see inside, I said to Kay after the filming that they're renovating.
They're renovating it. Wow.
But as I mentioned, they're even queuing. And it wasn't really that close to lunch at this point.
No, for the takeaway, yeah. And funny, I mean, I don't know whether you've said already, but the last time we went,
No.
the queues were just ridiculous at the Magpie Cafe. So we went to a fish and chip shop like 2 doors down.
It was great.
And it was absolutely lovely, and we didn't queue at all.
It was absolutely lovely, actually.
So the joke's on them, really.
Well, it is, and price-wise, I suspect it will have been substantially less.
Yeah.
Now, something I mentioned when I was scoring this for interestability is this really is the problem with the town. It's full of arcades,
Yeah.
and it's full of tourists.
I don't like it at
No.
all.
And what it does is it takes away the historical charm.
It
and
does.
that's the reason why it scored low. But what's so nuts is you just glance over there.
I know.
But the funny thing is, though, we'd never been to Tate Hill Beach before. That beach where I did the original filming. We have
Right.
never been there, have we?
No.
And, you know, you are sucked into the parts.
Look at all these people looking at you thinking, what is this fool doing?
There wasn't too much of that, Mrs.
Oh, that's a big seagull.
Yes, there was loads of big seagulls around.
They're
And
ginormous.
there was loads of signs saying, do not feed the seagulls
I know, and
because they
people-
will attack.
Yeah, I mean, people do. They'll sit there like feeding them chips, and they shouldn't do it, really.
No, they definitely shouldn't do it. Now, look out there, see it? There's the seal.
Where is that?
There.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
I know. How amazing is that?
It's more than you saw in Scotland.
I know. You saw a seal. but I
We
didn't.
did. Me and Bryony did
Yeah.
see a seal. Yeah, for a nanosecond.
He's just swimming up the harbour. I mean,
Bless him.
you've got to love it, haven't you? And it makes you wonder, how many seals are there and where are they? Where do they
Yeah.
live, seals?
Well, I
On
have
islands,
no
don't
idea.
they?
I think so. On like rocky outcrops and things. I've no idea actually.
Someone who's watching
I'm
will
saying
know.
that, but
Tell us.
I've absolutely no idea.
And actually, here, none of this filming, I think I did put a little bit of that in, but none of this pier filming got into the episode because this is shooting for our next Hidden Histories of Great Britain show.
Oh, right.
This is here's a hot off the presses.
Look at that woman, she's got pom-poms on her boots.
Yes, she does. Hot off the presses, ladies and gentlemen, the next Hidden Histories, which will be out in 2018, it would have been out this year had it not been for my operation, will be all about Captain James Cook.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about James Cook is the Resolution and the Endeavour, yes, sailed out of there.
Wow.
Because they were made in that harbour.
It's a lovely harbour, isn't it?
It is. It is. And, you know, again, I mentioned earlier on in this director's cut that I was just totally unaware at how old it was. 1301.
Is that the lifeboat station?
It is.
Wow.
I know. Now, the lifeboat station now is actually over the road.
Oh,
That's
right.
a museum.
So that's the old one.
Yeah, oh, there's a nice view of a
Some
lady coming out of the
loos.
toilets.
Very nice.
Sorry, lady. Bandstand there on the left.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just wanted to grab another view of that, but then again, I got someone else
Coming out
of
the
the
loo.
toilets. Absolutely beautiful.
Dough-nuts.
Yeah,
What's
I know.
that all about?
Isn't it Dough?
Well, it is, but I think it gets shortened, doesn't it?
Now, it doesn't get much more Whitby than this.
Look at that boat.
It's perfect, isn't it?
It's a lovely colour, that blue.
What
Is
a
it
wonderful
green?
series it's been, Mrs. Jones.
It has.
We're winding down now to the final bits of footage. I hope you guys have enjoyed this special little director's cut. It's what they do on all the feature films now. They do this and the producers and directors talk over the top.
Excellent.
Yeah, I know. So thank you so much for watching.
And there's a nice view of a car park.
It's
Is there a
not, it's the
reason?
station.
Oh, right, okay.
So that's it. I'm done. It's about 4 hours of filming for about half an hour of footage. I'm now going to go home and start editing, and it'll be ready for you in episode 87.
1, 2. Nice. Yeah, then where's a good shot? There we go. Here we go then. Something similar to Monte Carlo, not Yorkshire in the dead of winter.
That was a trick. It wasn't real.
1, 2. Oh, I need to know what I'm doing, don't I? And hopefully no one is going to come strolling along, unless it's over there, which is fine. What is... Oh, crumbs. So join me later on in the show when we'll be finding out how Bram Stoker named his famous book, and I'll be trying 2 of Whitby's most famous delicacies. So there's a really famous fish and chip shop. I'm getting covered here.